A sign of a good video game is its ability to retain player investment. After all, outside of the cash needed to buy the title in the first place, a game has to work hard to make sure that we actually reach the credits. And sadly, a lot of times these titles fail, sometimes because of an issue with pacing, not finding the sweet spot in their gameplay loop, or just because they were too fully stocked with side quests that people often just became fatigued by the main quest. Now, these little touches have meant that some video games that we might look back on and say, damn, that was actually brilliant, never got another chance to shine and are now resigned to exist in the doldrums of excellent but flawed games that unfortunately have either been outclassed or just forgotten about. So let's dig up some bodies today and remind ourselves of the good old times. I'm Jules, this is WhatCulture.com, and these are 10 great video games that you'll likely never play again, and why. Number 10, the Sherlock Holmes series. We begin with a sad and fairly recent example of the issues with license holders and their relationships with developers, as it was announced that the Sherlock Holmes series of games made by Frogwares is now being removed from sale and store fronts due to Focus Home Interactive, who's decided to refuse the transfer of the game's license to Frogwares despite their agreement to do so being in place. The games themselves were a bit buggy in places, and if you've seen the teleporting Watson glitch, can actually be pretty terrifying in others, but they were brilliant examples of gameplay trumping graphics, as you really did need to get your thinking cap on in order to solve some of the cases presented to Holmes. It's a true shame to see a license disagreement derail a series with such a cult following, and even more so when it seems to have been done so out of a greedy grab for cash by Focus Home Interactive. Fingers crossed that this is resolved properly, but at this point in time, it's a worrying look at how companies can remove IDs on a whim and leave others hanging on by a thread. Number 9, Demon's Souls. The first entry into the infamously challenging action RPG series that would go on to bring us Dark Souls and Bloodborne is a brilliant, if a little unrefined, gem. It introduced the concept of tough but fair challenge that would go on to become the hallmark of the Blood, Soul, Sekiro series, and one that would capture the love and hearts of fans the world over. Now, unlike so many other AAA games, death was actually a thing to fear in Demon's Souls, and could result in hours of lost game time if you tried to rush the experience and mess up. But you know what? You learned from these mistakes, and it meant that your successes, particularly victories over the game's truly menacing, majestic bosses, would make you feel truly euphoric in a way that other games couldn't possibly achieve. Yet, it's a sad statement to say that we're pretty much having to say goodbye to this title. The online play section has now been shut down, and as a PS3 exclusive, it was seeing dwindling love as it was, and now as we move into yet another cycle of consoles is going to see even less. Fans are still pining for a remaster, but it looks unlikely given the entire radio silence on the subject from the developers. It's a game that proved Sony wrong, who originally thought there was no merit in this title, and kickstarted the masochistic following that we have today. But you know what? At its core, this is kind of like a rough draft of what the series would become, and in many, many ways, it's been bettered across the board, meaning that there's even less reason to return. Number 8, Grand Theft Auto 4. Now, I'd wager that GTA 4 took a lot of people by surprise when it first released. Going from the over-the-top and crazy experiences gifted to us in Vice City and San Andreas, this return to Liberty City scaled back the insanity and brought with it a grounding sense of realism. Now, true, there were moments of levity to be had, but this was much more of a personal tale than the other games. It was dirtier, it was grittier, and it held with it a tragic ending that was markedly different to what came before. And while it plays beautifully and still holds up visually, and possesses arguably one of the best plots in the franchise, it doesn't have flying DeLoreans, explosions every 5 minutes, and, dog apps. And what I mean by this is that GTA 5 blew everything out of the water with its arrival, almost to the point that people actually seem to forget about other GTA games that came before it. GTA 4 was brave in the direction it took, but it was overtaken by the carnival lights and sounds of 5 to the point that it's almost like it's impossible to think how GTA 6 will even come close to taking over this mantle. Hell, I might end up making a list about this again in the future with 5 taking the place of 4, but at this point in time, it's like looking into the sun and saying, yeah, can I have that but a bit brighter, please? Number 7, any annually released game. Now, this might seem like cheating to include any and all franchise games that come out each year, like your NBA games or your FIFAs or your WWE titles, but seriously, think about this for a moment. Now, these games literally don't need to update themselves each and every year. They could, in all good conscience, simply update their roster and their abilities with patches and, at a push, maybe some DLC. The only reason that they actually release every year is so that they can gouge your wallet once more and reset your progress to to make you go through the same motions in nearly identical ways. It's like, oh swell, that's my ultimate team sorted, and yes, I've taken Torquay United to the finals, brilliant. Oh, what's this? Oh, it's next year's game. Well, I guess I better get Torquay United to the finals and sort my ultimate team out again. What this means is that the few games that truly do wonders with their formula, either through big gameplay updates or perfections in the gameplay, feel piecemeal because they'll likely get buried in a few months' time regardless. It also means that publishers have gotten lazy because they pretty much have you already hooked as their core audience. And if you don't believe me, just look at what happened to NBA 2K20 this year. Jeez. Number 6. Far Cry 2. This second game in the Far Cry series was actually the first that was developed by Ubisoft rather than Crytek, and it is a brilliant game, taking the series' open-world gameplay to the African savannah, which is a vast and vibrant environment that's actually rarely been explored in video games. Using the area's barren nature, you get pockets of colour and life, and then vast stretches of beautiful but deadly terrain. The storyline is actually surprisingly sensitive in its depiction of a political power struggle in a turbulent country, and you know what? Its buddy system, where actual named characters come to your aid and quite possibly die in awesome moments of unpredictable emergent gameplay, was utterly brilliant. And then there's the game's ending, which still continues to fuel fan debates to this day. Just who really was the Jackal? And yet, you'll never play it again because it wasn't filled with the super eccentric Bond villains, nor did it have its one per game drug sequence and sense of wackiness. I mean, it did have drugs of sort, but that was for malaria, which is about as funny as it sounds. It's a shame that the move towards arcade action means that it's even less likely that the series nor the player base will ever pick up Far Cry 2 and its tone again. Number 5. Heavy Rain. This story-driven interactive drama game from Quantic Dream presented players with multiple possible story arcs depending on the decisions the player made, which in turn gave players a sense of meaningful, consequential choices. Now, Heavy Rain managed to contain all of this inside a truly cinematic experience, meaning that things are kept quite insanely suspenseful with clever cuts and uses of QTEs. Now, simply put, some of these actions wouldn't be as fun if we were controlling the character, and by relegating the player to the back seat, it did mean that when we do get to interact with stuff, it feels like we have a sudden form of agency and control. However, of all of the video game genres, the interactive drama style is probably the least conducive to replayability. After all the actions in the game are based on quick-time events, and much of the suspense comes in not knowing what's about to happen, then suddenly fumbling around as your character gets attacked by somebody or needs to go through the proper kissing motion so that they can jump into bed with someone. The whole game is based on small moments with big consequences, and the entire impact of this is diminished once you know that these moments are coming, and you're only really likely going to return to the game to mop up the trophies and then let it gather dust. It's a shame, but a limitation of the genre rather than a critique of the game itself. Number 4. Outlast. So Outlast puts you in the role of a reporter who investigates strange goings-on at an old asylum, and its use of helpless horror conveyed a real sense of dread as you were forced to run from your enemies rather than try to stand toe-to-toe with them. The camera, with its limited battery, was both a brilliant survival tool and means of building up suspense, as witnessing the ghoulish, murderous patience of the asylum through night vision is almost as horrifying as stumbling around in the dark itself. And yet, for all of its excellent presentation and nail-biting gameplay, Outlast has one distinct disadvantage. Unlike games like Amnesia, Alien Isolation, and even the PT demo RIP, it doesn't use random enemy generation. So should you choose to replay a sequence or even the whole game, enemy positions will be the same each and every time. This means that the fear factor, i.e. the very reason that you play a game like this, diminishes the more you play it, which sadly means that the game's longevity doesn't, well, outlast its first playthrough. I mean, this was fixed in the second game, but then it possibly went too far in the other direction. Number 3. Gone Home. While exploration games have slowly risen to prominence in recent years, Gone Home remains probably one of the best of them. Throughout the 3 or so hours of the game's length, you simply wander around the house, opening drawers, switching on lights in rooms, and generally just nosing about, basically just killing time until the action starts, much like when we're all waiting on set for your mum to strap into the sex harness. Come on, love, hurry up, we're both on the clock like. Anyway, the atmosphere is incredible, taking its cues from horror games while at the same time feeling welcoming and nostalgic. But despite being a touching tale told through your interactions with the environment, Gone Home's issues rely on it being, well, too good. Its build up to the end is truly suspenseful, and yet once you've witnessed the close of the game, you're left satisfied but with no real reason to replay it. It's like eating a perfect meal. You're full and content, but at the same time you sadly know that nothing else will be quite as good, so why bother trying to chase it? Number 2. BioShock Infinite. Right, let's just get this out of the way. Infinite is my least favourite of the BioShock games, and I bloody love me some BioShock. I didn't care for the combat, nor the bullet-spongy enemies, nor did I really truly enjoy the tired slog that was the ending of the game. However, what I did enjoy, along with so many others, is the story, which once again is a brilliant look at the concept of power and abuse of that power. When the game is running at full pelt, you care about the future of Columbia and the plight of Booker, and as you're swinging down a sky rail at top speed, that sense of exhilaration is unrivaled. And yet it's these rails that actually represent one of the biggest issues. The game is, pun incoming, on rails when it comes to gameplay. The world around you might be beautifully designed, but you feel corridored all the time with only a few real moments of emergent exploration. Therefore, once you've completed the game and fought that bloody banshee God knows how many times, is there any incentive to return? With Rapture, that felt like there was an alluring draw, yet because of Columbia's more linear approach, it felt like you'd seen all there was to see in the city above the skies. And number 1, The Walking Dead. In a lot of ways, Telltale's The Walking Dead is an evolution of the kind of storytelling offered up by Heavy Rain. But where the Heavy Rain cast of characters was a bit on the cold and maybe aloof side, in The Walking Dead every single person you meet feels truly memorable, with their own background or survival story to tell. Few games make you care this much about their characters, a feeling made all the more powerful by the fact that your choices seemingly affect who lives and who dies. The Walking Dead is a game that doesn't let you retract your decisions or undo events that occur, and much of its impact comes from this true-to-life fact that time is irreversible. If someone dies, that's it, and you have to live with it. Which you might think would make a great reason to replay this game. But here's the kicker. The desire to replay is strong, especially with the new HD version now out, but the storytelling in Season 2 especially makes it clear that certain events were always going to happen, removing some of that weight. And in these moments, as sad as it is to say, the illusion of choice becomes more apparent, and you might find yourself less willing to play through the amazing first season, knowing where things are headed. And there we go, those were 10 great video games that you will likely never play again, and why. Let me know what you thought about it down in the comments section below, and I hope that you have a bloody great day, whatever you are getting up to right there. Bit of love from me to you, you bloody ledge. If you want to follow me, you can do so at RetroJ with a 0 over on Twitter. And as always, you have been awesome, and I'll speak to you soon. Bye.